right, it's past 5 o'clock, so we're going to call to order this special joint meeting of the Council of the City of Crescent City and the Crescent City Fire Protection District Board of Directors this Monday, October 8th, 2018. And if our clerks would please call the roll.
Councilmember Short.
Here.
Councilmember Greeno.
Here.
Councilmember Fallman.
Here.
And Mayor Inscore.
I am here.
Vice Chair Short.
Here.
Director Kelly.
Yep.
Director Winagrada. And Director Erler.
All right, would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And Councilmember Short is going to lead us.
Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will open up for general public comment. Any member of the audience is invited to address the City Council and the Fire Protection District on any matter that is within our jurisdiction. Public interest comments can also be entertained, but we cannot take extended discussion on any non-agendized items, but could place those on future agendas in working with our respective staffs. Any comments that are not at the microphone will be out of order. Please introduce yourself and identify your residency, either city or county, when you come to the microphone, and limit your public comment to 3 minutes. Do we have any general public comment this evening?
Mr. Mayor, if you'll allow me, I'm going to have to recuse myself for this meeting. I do have a financial interest in the items that is going to be discussed tonight, but I would like to make some public comment.
All right.
My name is Darren Short. I'm a resident of the city. I'm also Battalion Chief at Crescent Fire Protection District, which is now Crescent City Fire and Rescue. I just wanted to express to you that the reason this discussion has come up is due in part to our Fire Chief Steve Wakefield's illness that he's fallen into, and our duty coverage structure that we have put in place as a result of that. Right now, only the chief officers are covering duty when Bill Gillespie isn't here. That consists of 4 battalion chiefs, a deputy chief, and some assistant chiefs. As it is now, we'd like to see our captains come into that rotation also. As the stipend structure is set up now, the duty chief is compensated at $100 a day or a shift, and there was no mechanism put in place to bring the captains into that fold. So what I hope that we can put into place is a compensation structure for them, so we can get them trained up to be competent duty chiefs. In the absence of a chief, they're basically, the duty chief is the chief of the department. So that's why I'm hoping that you guys will have a positive discussion about that compensation structure, so we can expand that pool of men and women who will be able to cover the chief while the chief is gone. Appreciate your time.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, do we have any other general public comment before we move into our single item this evening? Seeing no other general public comment, we will move on into new business. We will have opportunity for public comment as we move through this item. Our single item is the City of Crescent City and Crescent City Fire Protection District approval of fire services related duty officer stipend increase and the associated budget adjustments. Mr. Weir, Chief, sure. Which one of you is going to go first?
Thank you, Mayor Inscore, Vice Chair Short. I would like to announce Bill Gillespie, our interim fire chief, to give this presentation.
All right, very good. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, members of council and members of the board. So as you're all very well aware, this used to function as 2 fire departments. Through positive work by both the council and the board, we've been able to come together operationally as Crescent City Fire and Rescue. That brought us under one chief, Chief Wakefield. And we all know how the high level of dedication that Chief Wakefield brought to the position, often covering duty coverage 6 and 7 days a week for weeks on end. Occasional breaks where at the time either a battalion chief or a captain would step in and give him a short break, but he never really stepped away from it. I think as he was moving forward, he was trying to work on some succession planning to try and broaden that pool of personnel. Unfortunately, he never was able to get there. With his medical emergency, all of a sudden in the end of January, the department, as department members knew it, changed because Chief Wakefield wasn't there and available to be able to do the duty coverage. Now, we place a high level of importance on our duty officer, on the duty coverage. Other departments, whether in this county or other counties, I'm familiar with a lot of departments in Humboldt, they don't have a dedicated duty officer. And what that means is when the tone goes off, when they get an emergency call, often it's a hope that somebody is available in the community to be able to respond. And just in the time that I have been here, I have heard other departments that did not get somebody to come up on the radio for the first tone. The second tone happened, and you listen as you hear this difficulty breathing or a choking call that's 8.5 and 9 minutes into a response before there's somebody that comes up on the radio. Crescent City Fire and Rescue has not operated that way. We've always maintained a duty officer so that when a 911 call comes in, a person answers the radio immediately and they're on the road for a response. We always know for our community that we've got somebody that is responding. With Chief Wakefield and his emergency, it came to a point though that all of a sudden he wasn't there. And so personnel picked up that role. Our community never saw a drop in what they expected from the fire department. There was not a call that was missed because there wasn't a duty officer. But it also pushed folks that had on rare occasion covered duty coverage to now do it multiple days at a time. This has and continues to put considerable strain on them, all of which work full-time, in addition to covering 1 or 2 24-hour shifts a week, depending on the week schedule. And it puts a tremendous strain on their families as well. The way we set up at the end of February, and it was through joint action of both boards, was to apply a $100 duty stipend for the battalion chiefs. Essentially, a $100 duty stipend for a primary duty officer. And that's a term that I want to use going forward, is that primary duty officer. And the primary duty officer really, as we heard Member Short say, is, when I'm gone, is that acting fire chief. They go through, they've got to monitor the radio 24/7, or 24 hours a day when they have that duty coverage. So that goes with them into their bedroom. That goes with them to the bathroom, to the shower, to every place they go. They are tied by this umbilical for the community. When a call does come in, they are the radio contact to dispatch, so dispatch knows that somebody is responding. They head out the door for the response. They're going directly to the scene. While people are coming to the station to pick up gear and apparatus, they're going directly to the scene to get somebody on scene quickly. They're also answering the multiple units that are responding. If it's a medical aid, they might have 5172 coming from Washington Station, and they've got 5175 coming from City Station just down the street, or they've got somebody in a private vehicle that is responding because they're 3 blocks from the call. They've got to be able to log that and who's responding to make sure that they have an adequate response to make sure that they're answering radio traffic with all of these, which is 2 radios now in the vehicle while they're driving code 3. They confirm an adequate response, then they get on scene and they're responsible for the incident management. Not only are they potentially hands-on in the initial stages of an emergency, like one call that I had, I was the first one there, and in between radio broadcasts, I'm doing CPR on a person as the response is coming in. They could be hands-on, whether it's a medical aid, whether it's a fire. They're the ones that send people home or that give assignments while on scene. They're also responsible for incident documentation, the run report at the end, because we have to answer to or submit to NFIRS, which is the National Fire Incident Reporting System. If we don't do that adequately, we don't apply for, or we don't qualify for federal grants. So they have to do that. They also have to do it so that if they're called to testify as the duty officer, they've got a record. You know, they handle vehicle and traffic incidents, all kinds of different calls for service. They also handle issues that may come up in businesses, burn complaints, that kind of thing. They might have to go to one of our businesses in town to deal with an exiting issue. Well, they've got the coverage because at that point I'm an hour and a half away. Essentially, they're handling any personnel issues that occur in my absence currently as the interim chief. And they also handle anything, heaven forbid, if we trade paint with somebody, they've got to deal with that. So there's a lot that gets roped into it. When I came into the mix in the beginning of April, I took on immediately covering 3.5 duty days. So from Monday morning, essentially at 8 o'clock, until Thursday evening, I've got duty coverage. That lessened the blow for the primary duty officer, but it still maintains Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday that we have coverage, or that we need coverage. So we've heard what the primary duty officer does, and ultimately what we're looking at is going from $100 per 24-hour shift to $200. I think when everybody came into this and we put this together, and it was even before I was here, nobody really knew what that demand on the personnel was going to be. The second piece of that, and we heard Councilmember Short refer to the captains. We've got some captains currently, we've actually got officers that are here in the room that cover some aspects of duty coverage periodically. And it never really was fully addressed with the captains on how to incorporate them. And so with the language in the presentation, you see a secondary duty officer. And that secondary duty officer is truly a training position. It's to work and build this pool. It's essentially succession planning for the future. It builds this pool by looking typically at a 12-hour shift, a half shift, at a $50 rate for them to work with a primary duty officer as they work through a task book that I've got in development at this point so that they can get up to speed and then step at the completion of that through that evaluation and training period, step into the primary duty officer role. So we've got solo individuals that we build that pool. We make that pool deeper than essentially 4 people. We build it up so that if something happened to me on the way to work next week, we've got people that are there that are able to step in without everybody, this small group, being bombarded. If we went through and did this in any other means, we're one of two. We're either reducing the level of response to our community, or we're having to increase costs even further because now you're talking about having to bring in another full-time person to be able to cover duty coverage. And with what we do currently, we would be looking at a considerable jump. This jump is, as you see in the packet, is it ends up being all toll, and I'll go back to the page, ends up being for the fire protection district, it is a $22,526 increase. For the city, then it's, and I didn't write on here, but we go, total expenditure increase for the city is $31,200. $22,526 does come from the district. Money, I know, is tight. It's tight for everyone. With this, it gives us a step towards succession planning. As you all know, we started down a path with Plan West Partners. They've started working on the information. They've actually started pulling information from the department to try and give us a better idea of where our future, or what our future looks like expenditure-wise. I know we're all facing tough times. I think this is a kind of a short-term or a mid-term approach to be able to try and start dealing with succession planning so that in the event we did have another issue that came up, we've got adequate trained personnel to be able to cover it without losing or reducing our service to our community. Yeah, I'll just step back.
Chief Gillespie, thank you. Did an excellent job sort of, telling everybody exactly where we are to date. Just wanted to go back a little bit, talk about some of that first history that Bill wasn't here for, and also just offer a sincere thank you again to the battalion chiefs that stepped up. Chief Wakefield's medical emergency shocked us all, and we sat down, we met with the department. These gentlemen in the department stepped right up to offer the level of service to our community that has been ongoing. Steve had his medical emergency January 25th. We didn't meet to even talk about what we're reevaluating now until the end of February. So immediately it wasn't what is the city or district going to do for us. It's how can we step up to help this community, and they did it right off the bat. We came to terms with the current stipend situation towards the end of February, and at that point we said we'd reevaluate in 90 days. So obviously it's been a little bit longer, but this is just that. This is that reevaluation of that. These gentlemen have continued to step up. Chief Gillespie wasn't hired until April. And so it was January 25th until the end of April. They were covering 7 days a week. So this is just the evolution. So just a sincere thank you, from myself, and just their efforts and their dedication to the community is undeniable, unbelievable.
Okay, either from the Fire Protection Board or from the council, any questions for Chief Gillespie? Need any? Yeah, Alan.
So as a duty chief, from the time you get a call, an average call,
Yeah.
we're not talking a structure fire.
Right, not a fire, but
day.
a medical aid. Yeah.
To the time you're done writing reports, how long is that?
From the time frame you go on take off on the call, each one's different, but typically you'll have with the response, management at the call, then the return, and then writing the report. You could have, on a typical basis, you're probably between a half hour and maybe up to 40 minutes, depending on the call. If it's a longer call, we have to run south, say down on the highway. Obviously, that makes it longer if it's a traffic collision or something like that.
So if I basically said an hour per call as duty chief, how many calls per day on average does a duty chief?
On average, the average call volume is about 4 calls per day. Some days you might have 2 or 3. Some days you might have 12 or 15. It fluctuates, and there's no rhyme or reason. We're on pace right now this year. It's looking like we're going to do about 1,600 calls for service, which is higher than we've done in the past. Yes.
So the duty chiefs for, let's just say 4 hours, and I understand being on call.
Yeah.
Are wanting $200 versus $100.
That's the amount that we're supporting at this point. Yeah, I mean, with the on-call side, essentially, if they want to go have dinner with their family, they take 2 vehicles. They don't go, they may go to a kid's sporting event and watch, and then they get interrupted typically. So far today, since this morning, there's been 5 calls. And the afternoon's been knock on wood, it's been slow. So they come in spurts. Those 5 ran from 7 a.m. this morning until about 12:30 this afternoon. And then who knows what tonight brings.
Okay.
Okay.
Other questions? Yeah, Jim.
You base your costs on the percentage of the current contract rate. But to me, a duty chief that's on standby is on standby for both jurisdictions at the same time. So why wouldn't we treat that as a 50-50 cost because you're on standby for both of them? Not just going to a historical level of response calls. Because we can't really predict the future, what's going to happen, where we're going to go. But we're there as a stipend suggests for the city, for the fire district area.
Right.
So why wouldn't that be an equal
Right. At the point when we brought this together, we based it on what the call volumes were showing historically. With that roughly 72% district split, and that's what these numbers were based off of. Obviously, it adjusts the back and forth. Because it's of the way the stipends are set up in the MOU agreement between the district and the city, that was the level that it's based purely 100% on call volume. And so that's what we looked at with that number.
So if we pay somebody, let's just use something new. Let's just use it for instance. You're paying somebody to standby $100 a day and there are no calls. Why does the fire district still have to pay them that higher amount? It still should be 50-50 even if there's no calls.
That's a good question.
Why are we paying an additional amount just because, and they don't respond?
No, I think it is a good question.
Well, to me, it's a fair question because the fire district is paying a higher amount based on call logs. But if there's no calls, why are we still paying that higher amount?
And it's fair question. It is something that we do want to look at through the Plans West master plan with the whole city and district and the fire department in general. So that we'll get a more in-depth look at. This one was based on the previous agreement. And so, two ways to look at it, the sheer amount of calls. So typically you would run twice as many calls on the district side as you would on the city on a normal day. If you run them all on the district side, that you don't pay any more, or less. So that's really what's before you today, is just looking not so much at the broader scope, because we're going to do that deeper dive once we get into that master plan, but really just looking at that compensation level for that duty coverage and that person that has to be available to address Alan's comment in regard to the sheer amount of time spent. You don't know when these calls are going to come. So like on the public works side, on the city side, it's a 2-hour minimum call out. So if you run 4 calls and they're spread throughout the day and you were, say, just on call, you would get paid for that 8 hours. So it's not just that time period. It is, it's that being available and the sheer amount of availability that it takes all throughout the day and night.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the 22,000, what are we going to cut? What are we losing by providing this?
At this point, we're not losing anything. We haven't looked at with the district budget cutting anything. We currently, as I reported at the last district board meeting, we're looking at about a $35,000 influx of funds coming from the coverage work that we did down at the CAL FIRE station. And then typically with what I've been able to get as historical or in the past, when we have balanced a budget that went into a deficit amount, we have not come near that amount at the end of the budget year, based on whether it be personnel cost, certain number factored for stipends. We factor a certain amount for vehicle repair or for fuel, and those, as we build the budget, those are factored at a conservative projected worst-case scenario, not at, okay, we're just above what we think we're gonna need within $1 or $2. We try and make sure we look at it realistically so that we cover those overages. With this, we're looking at that being the deficit that we've got currently projected is going to be far less than what we anticipate. And then, like I say, with the injection right now just of the CAL FIRE money, we're seeing when that comes in, that's about a $35,000 influx that we're going to see sometime here in the next coming months. So.
Anything else? I guess it's not a question, but more of a comment. The reality is there is nowhere that you're going to find the level of service and the commitment that you see here in this community with our fire department. It's just all there is to it. When you look at the dedication of our volunteers and the expertise that is seen there, and much of that is reflected in this room and lots of other people who are not here. This community has become used to that level of service, and that's to all of you guys' credit. And we want to maintain that. But to do that, we have to realize that I think we need to compensate those who are doing this duty coverage. We want to encourage that. We want to encourage others to step into this role. When you look at the numbers, and I sat down with right after I got elected with Chief Wakefield and talked numbers and talked about what it would cost to provide this if we were paying for this level of coverage with employees. And you know, we talk about being short $22,000 or $8,600 for the city. We're talking about millions of dollars to provide this, and so I think it's up to us to find those resources right now. We're not exactly sure what this is all going to look like once Plan West looks at all these numbers and we reevaluate our structures and everything else. But we know it's not going to be less expensive to do anything that we do anymore. But we have a responsibility to this community. And I'll just say this, and I guess maybe I'm probably stepping over the line here, but I'll do it anyway because that's just how I am. If we got into a situation where seriously the fire protection district financially could not afford that, then I would lobby that the city come alongside the district to make sure that we do what needs to be done to make sure that this community gets the service they've always got. I don't know what that looks like, but I believe that we have a level of commitment on the city side and on the city council that we're going to make sure that we work together as partners to provide the absolute best service, just like they've always got in this community. And you know, I just think that, and yeah, I guess when you look at it, and I hadn't thought about it, Alan, from the idea of if you're been 4 hours, that's $50 an hour. That seems like a lot of money. On the other hand, having that radio beside you 24 hours a day, that there's a cost for a person to have to do that. Do you really? Yeah. So I'm fully supportive of this. You know, I've looked at the numbers and I've talked to some of the battalion chiefs, and I know the commitment that they've shared, and I know that we have captains who are willing to be trained up, and we need to start looking at that future firefighter, because none of us are getting any younger, right, David? Are you getting younger? Yeah, I didn't think so. Me neither. Some of us want to know that there's somebody on the other end of that radio when we decide to take falls in parking lots, and so I'm just saying. Okay, anything else, guys? No? All right, Mr. Weir, Chief. Okay, then we've got we'll take some public comment if we have any public comment tonight that would like to weigh in on this before we move on with the actions we need to take. Got any public comment tonight? Anybody else want to weigh in? Going once, twice? All right, then we'll bring it back. We have 4 items that we need to take, and then we need to take them in specific order, because if we don't transfer the budget monies, then it doesn't really matter what we do as far as position control and stipends. So if you got to put the money there first. So the first course of action would be on the Crescent Fire Protection District. That would be item A, to consider and approve a budget and position control adjustment request of the Crescent City Fire Protection District, amending the fiscal year 2018-19 budget as appropriate, which is the $22,526. So that would require a motion from one of you down there.
Do we have a motion? I make a motion we approve the adjustment.
Any second?
Okay, if we do not have a motion and a second, then we're going to be done.
Can I second?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can.
Then I'll second.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. Then would you, Vanessa, please poll the Fire District Board?
Yes. Vice Chair Short,
Yes.
Director Kelly,
Yes.
Director Winograd, and Director Erler.
All right. In that case, then the other items have no bearing, because there's no reason for the city to consider a budget amendment, and neither of the resolutions for the stipends are appropriate without the necessary budget adjustments. So having no other business, then we will stand adjourned until our next special meeting. I'm assuming the ad hoc will go back and talk about this, and we'll come back when it's appropriate. Okay, we're adjourned.